For exercise 3, we are going to take a little departure from what we've previously been doing with these extrusions, and we're moving on to another very popular feature when you're drawing called a revolve. In this case, the revolve that we're going to create is this wheel, and if we look at it, it's not super complicated. It's far more complicated than anything we've drawn yet. But you'll see that the underlying sketch is simply one sketch that's revolved around a center axis. Revolves are very useful anytime you have a geometry that is symmetrical about a center axis. So in the case of this wheel, our central axis is kind of the middle of this hub, and we're just simply going to look at the geometry that's about that hub. So the best way to show this is actually to create a section view of that wheel. We can do that very simply by simply clicking on the section view tool here, and we're actually going to change the plane that we're sectioning about to be the right plane. And at this point you can actually change where you're looking at in that section. We want to look right kind of to the center of our object, and we can then take a look at that section view. So if we select that section view, you'll see now what we're seeing, the center of that wheel. So if we look at this, you'll see that the geometry is mirrored about this kind of central corridor, the central axis here, the hub of the wheel. And what we're actually looking at is this geometry that looks actually pretty similar to what an I-beam might look like. And that's the thing we're actually going to sketch. The lovely thing about the revolve is we can be really efficient in our drawing methodology. What I mean by that is we don't need to draw this and this. All we need to do is do this one sketch here, that if I just hover over that, you'll see the section that's highlighted in orange. What's even more efficient about this is we don't even need to draw that whole thing. If we look at just this particular side of the object, you'll see it has a central axis here that this top part is mirrored about to this bottom part. So we're going to simply draw that top part and we'll revolve that this way to create the overall wheel. So let's take a look at the sketch that underlies this revolve. Again, we're looking now at the cross section of the wheel, and we're looking at just one side of that cross section. And so very much it looks just like this outside geometry that we've portrayed here. You'll note two other really important components here is the center line here, and that is going to provide our axis of revolution. And we also have a center line here. This really speaks to efficiency in drawing. There's no reason to draw the entire thing when we can just draw this top half and mirror it about that line. And so we set these up at the very start of our sketch, and you'll see that as we go through this step by step. Outside of that, there are a lot of dimensions that make this up. They're all pretty straightforward and pretty easy. The other thing I really want to show you, and again, we'll cover this as we do this step by step, is if you look at these three dimensions here, these actually refer to centerline dimensions or diameter dimensions. Some program refers to them as. But essentially, if you look at this, we are dimensioning across this center line. So if I highlight the 20, for example, the distance from the center line to the edge of here is actually just 10 millimeters. But we're given a value of 20 millimeters. So rather than have to do the math here, we can just input the diameter by dimensioning across this center line. Similarly, we do that with this point here and with this outside line, which gives it the overall diameter of the wheel. This way we don't have to do math. Right now these numbers are fairly easy for us to do half of, to compute. But if they had several decimal places afterwards, it would be much more difficult to do that. So moving to a diameter dimension is going to be a lot easier for those. Everything else is pretty straightforward, and again, we'll cover this as we go. So now that we have that sketch and we know what that looks like, let's go ahead and do a step-by-step setup of how we create this drawing. Let's get started drawing our wheel. So I've opened up a new file in SolidWorks. The first thing I'm going to do is go down and check my units. Again, we're doing mmgs or millimeter gram second for this exercise, so you'll want to make sure you're in mmgs as your units. Next thing I'm going to do, like most SolidWorks drawings, is I'm going to start a sketch. So I'm going to click the sketch tab, click the sketch button. I want my wheel to kind of roll on the ground, so I'm going to choose the top plane as the plane I'm drawing on. All right, our origin is active. Our plane is normal to our monitor surface. I'm now going to go up to the line tool. I'm going to click the little arrow to the right of the line tool, and I'm going to choose center line. And I'm going to do this so that I can create first a vertical line coming from the origin point and moving directly upward. And that is going to be my axis of rotation. So I'm going to rotate around this line in order to create the wheel geometry. The next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to hit escape to get out of the line command, and I'm going to come back up here to the line command again and choose another center line. And this time I'm going to start at the origin point, and I'm going to pull a horizontal line. This is going to be the axis about which I mirror. So I'm going to hit escape to get out of the line command. And essentially all I've done is create a y-axis and an x-axis that I can work off of. This one again is my axis of rotation, and this is going to be the line that I mirror the geometry about. So I only have to draw that top half of that overall geometry. With those two lines existing, now I can go ahead and I'm going to zoom in here a little bit so I can see what's going on. And I'm going to just invoke the line command one more time. And I'm going to start on this line. But before I do that, I can either draw this half and mirror it, or I actually like to use a different tool. This is kind of fancy SolidWorks now. We're going to use what's called a dynamic mirror. So I'm going to go up here to the SolidWorks menu. So hover over there. I'm going to come over to Tools, go down to Sketch Tools, and then under that you'll see Dynamic Mirror is one of the options. I'm going to choose Dynamic Mirror. SolidWorks asked me to select a line to mirror about, and I'm going to select this horizontal line. When I select that, I know it's a dynamic mirror line because on either end it has these two little hash marks. That's indicating that it's an active dynamic mirror line. And I'm going to go ahead, choose my line command, and start to draw. I'm hovering over that horizontal line. I'm not starting at the origin. I need to leave space here for that center hub of my wheel. So I don't want to start right on the origin. I'm going to start a little bit away. Hover till that line turns orange. That means it's going to select that line as its start point. From there, I'm going to pull a line vertical. Click. I'm going to pull to the right a horizontal line. Click. I'm going to pull down at an angle. I'm not going to cross over that center line. I'm going to make sure that I stay above it. Click. I'm going to pull to the right a horizontal line paralleling my mirror line. And you can see that dynamic mirror line, because it's on, every time I click, it's actually creating a line below that mirror line for me. So I can see the resulting geometry. So I pulled another vertical. I'm pulling now a short horizontal. And then I'm going to finish this off by going down and stopping at that midpoint line. Again, it's important not to cross over that line because then it lays a line on top of itself. So you want to stop right here on that mirror line and finish that off. The minute I click there, obviously I've created a solid closed body. It's turned gray, so it's indicating that that's a closed body. And I have kind of the start of my wheel. You'll see now we have a ton of these relationships that exist throughout the drawing. The most important ones probably are your verticals and horizontals. This coincident relationship of that line starting there and the coincident relationship of the line finishing there. All of these numbered values here are indicating a mirrored relationship. So this number 4 here goes with this number 4 here. The 2 and the 2 of those points there, the 1 and the 1. So you can kind of follow the logic here of how SolidWorks thinks about this as you go. So with this in mind, now I can go ahead and start the dimensioning process, which is going to kind of fine-tune this geometry to be exactly what I want it to be. To do that, I go up to the Smart Dimension tool and turn it on. These first the first 3 dimensions are going to be those center line dimensions. So I'm dimensioning across the center line. So watch what I do here. I'm going to come to that center line that I drew and click it. And I'm going to choose first this left-hand edge of my sketch and click it. And you'll note that if I'm here, it's giving me the resultant resultant dimension between that center line and that edge. But if I move my mouse across that center line, you'll note now that it switches to that center line dimension. So it's giving me now the true diameter of what that wheel hub will be. And that's the information that I know. So rather than doing the math in my head, I don't have to do any math. I can just type 20 rather than dividing 20 by 2 and getting 10. With the dimension tool still active, you'll notice now that there's a little change to the icon next to the mouse pointer. And you'll see the dimension icon showing that it's in the dimension mode. But next to it, you'll see the D with the dotted line, meaning that it's ready to do another center line dimension. This is good because now I can go ahead and click this point, and it will automatically create another one of those center line dimensions for that distance. This is going to be 24. And then I'm going to click this outside line, my far outside line, because this is the third one that I need to do. And this is going to be 80. All right, I put that value in. Now, you'll note what just happened. So this will happen as you start to add dimensions to things. Your geometry may get inverted like we've seen here. You'll notice that it's no longer that solid gray interior because now we have a self-intersecting body, right? This line, when I gave it that dimension of 80, has moved over and shifted on the inside. The minute you see that happen, it's really important that you stop dimensioning and rewrite your geometry. And what I mean by that is I'm going to hit the escape key to get out of the dimension tool. I'm going to hit it a second time. And I'm going to come over here to this far right line. This is black. This line's black, which means I can't move it left or right. It's already been grounded by this dimension of 80. But I can come over here to the right, click and hold. So most other clicks we click and let go. Here I'm going to click and hold. And you'll note as I do that, it's allowing me to kind of correct the geometry. You can always do this in SolidWorks. If things are looking a little off, you can kind of adjust things to reorient them appropriately given the change in proportions as you add those dimensions. So that's all it is. I just clicked and pulled that line back over, put it where it needs to go. At this stage, I'm ready to continue my dimensioning. So I'm going to choose my Smart Dimension tool. I'm going to come down here and give this thickness. I'm going to choose that line there and that line there. Pull this dimension over here, and that wants to have a thickness of 5. And I need to add a thickness here, so click that line. And we'll come up, and that has a distance of 4. And we'll choose this edge here, bring that out. This has a distance of 29. And we'll do this edge here, and this has a length of 40. And last but not least, we need to create an angle between these two lines. So again, Dimension tool is still active. I click one, I click the other. It's going to give me the resultant angle, and this is going to be 8 degrees. Okay, when I have all those, I'm going to hit the escape key just so I can see everything. I don't see any blue lines or blue dots. If I look down here at the bottom, it tells me it's fully defined. So I know I have all of the dimensions I need to make this true. At this stage, we're now done with the sketch. And we can move on and we can actually create the revolve. So like always, I need to go up to the Exit Sketch button and click that. You'll see that I have my Sketch 1 is highlighted here. I'm going to click to the Features tab and then choose Revolved Boss Base up here in the top left. You'll note in my design histories, gone, and I'm now seeing the tool that's active, the revolve tool. This first field is highlighted blue, meaning it's accepting a click as a selection set. So it's asking for the axis of revolution. So here I want to revolve around that center line that I created. So I'm going to choose that. You'll notice immediately you see the preview of that. You could absolutely change things like a direction. You could, do a revolve up to a surface or up to a vertex, or you could do a mid-plane revolve if you wanted to. You can also change the angle from, like 360 degrees. You could do 180 degrees and get half a wheel instead. So obviously in this case we want a full wheel, so 360 degrees is the proper amount. I'm just going to show you if I do 180, it's only going to do half the wheel. So 360 is the correct number here, and we're happy with that, so we go ahead and hit the checkbox. So now we've fully created that wheel. You can see if we rotate this around, we have the full geometry of that wheel, 360 degree revolution. There's one last detail I want to add to this, and that is rarely will you see really hard edges on things. Typically when you manufacture, you add what are called fillets or chamfers, both to ease molding processes as well as to relieve potential areas of stress concentration, like at this corner here. And so adding fillets in SolidWorks is really easy to do. Up here, we haven't really used the modify tools yet, but we're going to choose this first one called fillet. And it will bring up your fillet box here on the left. You can see you have a bunch of different fillet types you could select from. The blue box asking for items to fillet is highlighted, meaning that we can go in and start our selection set. When I do this, I want to make sure that I'm getting things on both sides of the wheel. So I want to add a fillet to this edge, to this edge, to this edge. Because I want both of these edges, I can actually choose this whole surface. And I'm going to choose that similar surface on that back side. And I also want to fillet on this bottom edge and this corner. So I'm going to choose that surface as well. And that surface. And when I do that, you'll see that face 1, face 2, face 3, and face 4 are all highlighted. I can go in here and change that value. Here we want it to be 1.5 millimeters. And I'm going to choose full preview so I can see what's going on here. And you can see now that it's showing me in these little yellow lines all of those fillets on both sides. If I'm happy with these values, which I am, I'm going to hit that check mark to select them. And SolidWorks is going to do its magic and calculations. And you'll see we've put those nice little roundovers everywhere kind of to ease those edges. There's one more fillet I want to do on this, or I guess technically two. This edge right here and its mate on the other side. I want to get rid of that hard corner there. So I'm going to add a second fillet. So I'm just going to go back up to the fillet tool, select it. This time I'm going to change the size of that fillet to 1 millimeter. And this time, instead of choosing the surface, I don't want to choose the surface because that would put fillets on both sides. I'm just going to simply choose that edge. And I'm going to come over here to this side and choose the mating edge on the other end. Once I do that, they're both selected. That 1 millimeter is correct. And I go ahead and hit the checkbox. You'll note here in your design history on the left, we have our revolve. And then each of the fillets is its own feature. What this means is if you go back and you decide, oh, I didn't want those to be that size, I want to change them, all you have to do is right click on that, click edit feature, and you can make adjustments to the fillet size if you want to. Just going to open up that feature. You can delete things from this list, or you can change the fillet parameters. In this case, I did it correctly, so I can just hit the check mark again. And so that, ladies and gentlemen, is our wheel exercise 3. Hopefully you found that a little more challenging than the extrusions, but also enlightening as far as a different way to approach drawing anything that is symmetrical about a center axis. That concludes this exercise and this tutorial. I hope you'll tune in for our next tutorial in this series, which will be doing sweeps, something, again, completely different from anything we've done before. Thanks, and I'll see you there.